And welcome back to the Standard Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jono.
And I'm your host, Chris.
And we're here today to bring you the Week 14 waiver wires. We have a little bit of a...
It's playoff time.
It's playoff time. We got something special for you at the end here. So stay tuned to the end to hear that. So let's jump into it. All right, so let's break down this Week 14 waiver wires. A lot happened in Week 13, and we're filming this at 8:03 p.m. just before the kickoff of the Jaguars and Bengals game here. So a lot can still happen over the next couple hours. But that being said,
including Jono's fate.
Yeah, including my fate for whether I'm in the toilet bowl here or if I'm going to make the wild card in our league. In the offseason, we'll tell you a little bit how that wild card situation looks. It's something fun that we added to our league a couple of years ago, and it's actually been pretty important in terms of deciding factor for a lot of teams, and it's also kept everybody competitive. But let's talk about a couple people here for this Week 14 waiver wire. There's a bunch of injuries in terms of running backs, injuries to wide receivers, and we'll get into it when we start talking about these players. So number one here, we had an injury to Brian Robinson Jr. So it looks like he's going to be out for a couple weeks, most likely, depending upon how this hamstring works for him. I like Chris Rodriguez here as a good pickup. He seemed to be more explosive with the ball in his hands. I do like Antonio Gibson as well. Antonio Gibson's definitely better as a pass-catching back. I'd prefer him in PPR formats. But Chris Rodriguez, for sure, he was 7 for 29 this past game after Robinson left. Antonio Gibson was 10 for 35, so he definitely shouldered the load there. And there was no receptions for Rodriguez, whereas there were 4 for 37 for Gibson. So he's definitely going to get the passes out the backfield. What are your thoughts on those two backs?
Well, I was going to ask you, I know Gibson is more highly owned, obviously, than Rodriguez is, but who do you like? If both are available, who would you pick up?
So Antonio Gibson's 61% owned in sleeper leagues right now. So that's pretty heavily owned.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. If both are available, who do you go and target?
Like I said, I think I would take a shot on Rodriguez because I look back at a couple games when he was in there. He definitely feels a little more explosive. Like all his yards per carries have been over 4. Anytime he's gotten it. He had 6 for 43 against the Giants in Week 11. In Week 7 against the Giants, 7 for 31. I think if he gets more opportunities. Well, 4 for 23 against Atlanta. Dallas, he was 4 for 21. So I think when he gets his opportunities, he gets fired out of a cannon there. That's why I kind of like him. But if you are in a position where you need to win and don't want to take a chance on Rodriguez because he may be a flex play, I think Gibson is more of a RB3 flex, has a more opportunity to get yardage and get in the end zone for you because he'll be there and passing down. So I would go for Gibson over Rodriguez, even though I like Rodriguez more.
I think you said the key word there is opportunity. And I think that with Chris Rodriguez, yeah, he's been good when he's touched the ball, but Gibson's going to be used a lot more. And he has experience as being the lead back on this offense. And this team is just not very good. They can't really stop other teams from scoring. They're chasing points most games. The receiving down work is going to Antonio Gibson. So I like Gibson more. In fact, because of the Brian Robinson injury, I like Curtis Samuel as well.
I love Curtis Samuel here.
As a viable option. I think that they heavily involve him a little bit more. I've said this for a couple of years, obviously not on this podcast because we really haven't talked too much about Curtis Samuel, but he's Debo light. He's a Devo Samuel light.
He's 51% owned in sleeper. We've had him on our list here before, and I don't know why people keep dropping him. I think he needs to be owned as the Washington guy. And here's the thing. We're saying these two wide running backs here, and for all matter of purpose, Brian Robinson Jr. could be back in 2 weeks. So they have a bye next week. Then they have the LA Rams. Then they have the Jets, which is more of a favorable matchup. But so I think Gibson's the way to go if you're going to pick one of these guys up because against the Rams, they're going to pass out the backfield. They're not going to be able to run the ball as much, whereas Chris Rodriguez is more of a traditional runner for them.
Same with the Jets. I mean, you're not going to be able to really traditionally run the ball against them a little, and having a guy with a lot of very little experience going against that defensive front and those linebackers for both the Rams and for the Jets, it's going to be tough sledding for him. Where both those teams have been a little bit more susceptible as to the receiving back. Again, this is kind of why I would maybe hold off on. I like Chris Rodriguez if this is a longer injury. But because they're on bye, I think we have a week to kind of sit and wait and see what happens. Brian Robinson Jr. is, even though he's injured, they do have the bye week, so it couldn't have come at a better time for them. Obviously, for fantasy owners, it's really heartbreaking. I went over it today, just the amount of injuries that we had the week before the playoffs starting, or for a lot of people,
the entire season, to be honest with you, too.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's been a lot of injuries this entire season, but to hit at the very last week, I mean, you have Ramondre Stevenson, Derrick Henry, Brian Robinson Jr., Amari Cooper, Christian Watson. You have just all these guys go down, Tank Dell, and now you're going to have to try to replace these guys late in the season when the waiver wire is thin. There's still players there, but it's thin.
Well, like I said, we like Gibson. He's 61% owned, so he might not be there. But Chris Rodriguez is definitely low owned. And the thing is, he's definitely a more traditional. He's better, I think, pure runner out the backfield than Gibson is in terms of rushing. But in terms of receiving, which is what this team is going to be doing, they have the most amount of dropbacks in terms of Sam Howell at the quarterback position. So Gibson's the one they're going to probably lean on. But again, like we said, if you want to take a shot on Rodriguez because Gibson's owned in your league, go ahead, because they're playing for the future at this point. They want to see what they got. So maybe they actually give a chance to Rodriguez, give him some receptions out the backfield, because they're literally playing for the
Brian
future.
Robinson is the future. He's only a second-year player, but yeah, they're gonna see what they got in Rodriguez. The one stat that I would say I like is because of how big play this offense is, he might get some goal line opportunities, and he might get the goal line opportunities over Gibson. So yeah, if you're really desperate, if it looks like Brian Robinson's going to miss that first week of playoffs, and you just don't have a handcuff, you don't have anyone there to throw in. Yeah, this is a guy you can throw in, and he might get. I don't think his ceiling is 20 points, but he can easily fall into the end zone and get you a 10 to 15 point week. But the downside is he can go out there and get 40 points or 4 points.
Yeah. And just a quick for the first game back for after the bye against the Rams. If you look at what happened with the Cleveland Browns, a pretty good rush offense. They had more success out the backfield receiving than they did on the ground. They had a little couple spurts here and there, but nothing real big. They had more success, Jerome Ford through the air and Kareem Hunt through the air, than they did on the ground. So let's move on to another running back. You mentioned Ramondre Stevenson going down with that ankle. This is devastating for that team. I mean, they may not even bother with him for a little while and just let him heal it up because their season's all but over, obviously. So I love Zeke Elliott. He's on the injury report this week so far with a thigh injury, but I think he was this previous week. I think he'll be okay. He's going to be their lead back. He is, the crazy part, only 46% owned. I know our threshold we usually doing about 40, but the fact that he is only 46% owned and the usage he still gets out that backfield, like, it bothers me. It's almost like Kareem Hunt obviously was getting rushing touchdowns, which gave him his value, but he's more owned than Zeke Elliott, and he's getting the same amount of touches.
If Zeke is available in your league, go and pick him up.
Correct.
Because this offense can't do anything but run the football. And Zeke's looked good when he's in there, and now he's going to get, the share of they have no one else. Ty really
Montgomery.
Don't. Yeah, but they're not he's not getting 15 touches in the game.
No. I like Ty Montgomery for the stone's throw purpose that if Zeke is in your league, Zeke is already taken in your league, Ty Montgomery's like the Chris Rodriguez pick here. He's somebody you can grab that they're going to get receptions out the backfield because they throw it to the running backs out the backfield plenty.
I'm going to hold fast and disagree with you here.
You can.
I wouldn't touch Ty Montgomery. I don't think this offense is good enough to sustain two running backs. I mean, you look at Zeke, and he was you couldn't start him when Ramondre was in there, and especially the last couple of weeks. And the way Ramondre ran the football is between the tackles, and that's where he's been successful. And especially the last 2 weeks. So Zeke should be the guy to own here.
Correct.
And I think that there's better options. I would rather go get Chris Rodriguez than go and get Ty Montgomery. I just don't like this offense enough to say, oh yeah, like, because all right, he's gonna get the majority. I'll agree with you there. He's gonna get the majority of the passing work out of the backfield. But how much is that? Like,
hey, listen, I'm not saying Ty Montgomery's on the top of my list here. I'm throwing the name out there because we could see Ramondre Stevenson out for 4 weeks from now, like leading you through the playoffs.
Yeah.
So that's the thing is like
the reason they brought in Zeke is this reason.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
but I also can Zeke shoulder the full load the whole time, and I don't think that's the case. And I just think at the end of the day, you got a team. If you're the owner of Ramondre Stevenson, obviously, if Zeke's not available in your league, I'm not looking to Ty Montgomery. But if there's nothing else out there, and you got to take a dart throw on something, and if something happens, or if Zeke ends up being actually on the injury report with a thigh injury and limited for any reason, well, you got yourself somebody at least for this week. But that's just something to keep an eye on. I agree. Zeke is the guy to go. The fact that he's 46% owned in most leagues is crazy. So you're going to have to go out and get him. In fact, he was just dropped in our league.
I'd probably get, yeah. I mean, over Ty Montgomery, I'd probably go and get Michael Carter.
In Arizona?
In Arizona.
That's not a bad one. I mean, he's on bye this week, so that's the hard part.
Yeah, but it's the same thing as Chris Rodriguez. It's you're not playing for the last week of the season. So I mean, yeah, if you're in a situation where you have to win here and you only had 2 running backs, or Ramondre Stevenson was one of them, and there's no one else available, yeah, I mean, if you're going to throw a dart throw, I guess so. But if you're in that situation, definitely leave a comment.
And let us know who's available.
And let us.
What Chris was trying to say was, if you are in a situation like that, even if you're not, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification button. But drop a comment, because we'd be happy to help guide you through your waiver wire debauchery that you may be in this must-win week of Week 14 for most people. Let's move on to
shut up. Let me make you some money.
Let's move on to some wide receivers here. Who's your favorite wide receiver waiver pickup here this week?
You know, I said it last week during our start set. And I'll say it again this week. My favorite guy, I think, is going to be Alec Pierce. I mean, obviously, I'll retract that and say, like, Jayden Reed is the guy you should go and grab if he's available. We've talked about him for 5 or 6 straight weeks. But
he's 63% owned. But if you happen to be in a league where he's available, yeah, agreed.
But Alec Pierce is a really good option. He had 2 huge receptions down the field, one for a touchdown. The second one he could have gotten in, and the next play goes to Michael Pittman for the overtime winner. I liked his usage in this. I know a lot of the experts were on Josh Downs. Everyone was on Josh Downs. The usage for Alec Pierce is going up. He's a very similar style body to Michael Pittman, and you have 2 big receivers on the outside, and Alec Pierce is more of a down the field threat. I think they're starting to use that a little bit more. And Minshew, it seems to be like it in the last 2 weeks. I mean, he has 100 yards and a touchdown last week. Again, it was against Tennessee, so like take that with a grain of salt. But I like his matchups. There has to be a number 2. I said this last week, is the sustainability of what Michael Pittman is doing in terms of target share and the volume is crazy. So there has to be another guy, and the tight ends are not viable. You know, they're not great pass catching tight ends to where they're getting 8-9 targets a game. So where's their targets going to go to? Are you going to have 10 plus targets going to Josh Downs? Unlikely. And so Alec Pierce is a guy I really, really like here as a sleeper pick, and as a pick for the next couple of weeks, especially if you're dealing with some of these injuries. I mean, again, Marquise Brown, Amari Cooper, Christian Watson, Tank Dell. We had 4 really productive receivers all go down. Hollywood Brown wasn't productive, but
still a premier receiver, a top pass catcher. Yeah. I mean, I like Alec Pierce. He's only 8% owned. Obviously, he was 3 for 6 for 100 and a tutty. Here's the stat that I like about Alec Pierce. This season so far, he has a 15.6 yards per reception average. That's a whole 5.4 yards more than Michael Pittman on average. And Pittman had a 41 yard per reception game. So let's just put it that way. Alec Pierce is a little bit more downfield on the sideline, making a little deeper target option for Gardner Minshew. And we know he likes to sling it. So I do like Alec Pierce. I think they're going to have to throw the ball. I think you saw against a tough run defense that Zach Moss is not quite the Zach Moss at the beginning of the season. He's not rolling. I mean, it's tough to get pulled off a bench.
In that game.
Yeah. I think my favorite one is going to be Noah Brown. I'm stretching our limit here of 40% up to 50 because he's 49% owned in leagues. He played tied in snaps with Nico Collins this past game, 81% of the snaps amongst the receivers. Yes, he was 0 for 2 in that game, but he just coming back off the knee injury. I think they were using him well. They had other opportunities. They were moving the ball on the ground a little bit decently against the Broncos, and Nico Collins obviously had an amazing game here. But I think let's not forget Noah Brown had a game of 7 receptions for 172, a game of 6 receptions for 153 and a touchdown. And we know what Tank Dell was for that offense. And Noah Brown fits the bill to come in and take over that role. I don't love Robert Woods, but he's another option here as well because Robert Woods did have 2 receptions for 44 yards. But I just think that Noah Brown is your bigger playmaker. You have more bang for your buck in a receiver like him.
Let's flush this out a little bit because this is, I think, is a really big topic. I think Tank Dell was probably the biggest loss from a wide receiver position for an offense in this past week. So how does this team go about replacing that production? We saw this last game without Schultz that all that production went to Nico Collins, right? He just blew up, and they were targeting him often in that game. Mechie got a couple routes run, a couple catches, but they kind of start spreading it out a little bit more. With CJ Stroud and the way this passing offense is, this is, I think, a decision that if one of these guys is available, obviously I don't think Nico Collins is available in any of your leagues. He's probably in the 80s in terms of percentage owned. But Noah Brown is a guy that 49% owned. He's probably available in your league. If he is, go and pick him up. He's already had production in this offense. And with Tank Dell gone, he runs a lot of the similar routes, the deep crossing routes, the deep down the field routes that CJ Stroud likes to throw. They're not going to change this offense up now that Tank Dell's not there. So I do think that a lot of the short yardage peppering is going to go to Schultz. So he's a tight end you should definitely have your eye on if he's available in your league. Go and pick him up because I think his production's about to shoot through the roof.
Yeah.
But I would agree with you. I think Robert Woods is another good option. I think that we don't know. We talked about it in the beginning of the season. He was kind of going to be the odd man out in this offense.
Yep.
And with Tank Dell stepping in, he's remained being that odd man out. But there's enough production to go around, I think. Especially if teams start to key on Nico Collins and try to take him out of the game, then they're going to have to go to someone else. And whether that's Noah Brown or Robert Woods, who's lower owned than Noah Brown, go and get one of these guys. I would take someone in this offense versus Green Bay, let's just say.
Yeah. I agree. I would take somebody in this offense, the way they're passing the ball. I mean, don't get me wrong. Jordan Love is great, but the fact that Jayden Reed and Romeo Doubs, they're both 63 and 60% owned respectively. I think the option of being a number 2 wide receiver for this team, maybe not the number 2 option because you said Schultz, but the number 2 receiver here is worth it in Noah Brown. And like I said, he matched in the snap percentage with Nico Collins this game. You had 47% snap percentage for Robert Woods, and you had a high 30s for Mechie, because I think Mechie ended up being an afterthought as soon as Tank Dell was gone, which is something to keep an eye on. Do they want to go with the youth over Robert Woods or go with the veteran in the receiver there? And we don't know that yet. So it's tough to say. Robert Woods, 14% owned, Mechie, 3% owned. Who do you take a shot on if they're all taken in your league? Is it worth it?
If it were me, I would take Robert Woods over Mechie.
Me too.
And it's not anything against Mechie, but Woods, even when Tank Dell was healthy and Noah Brown was healthy, Woods was still out there. Like, Woods was still running routes. He wasn't getting the targets, but Mechie was the odd man out looking in completely on that wide receiver core. So I don't think he all of a sudden jumps Woods, and their ownership is very similar. if I'm having to take a chance and just trying to replace Tank Dell or get another guy just to stash for the the playoff run, it'll be Robert Woods and not Mechie.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Mechie's the last guy on this list. No, but Noah Brown, the fact that the snap percentage was equivalent to the receiving leader, obviously he had no receptions in that game. That he peppered Nico Collins. But I don't think that's going to be the case moving forward, because you look at the games, even when Tank Dell was playing, Noah Brown was still getting receptions on the lower end than what he was in those bigger games. So look for Noah Brown, 49% owned. He's my favorite of the week here. And then obviously Robert Woods as a tier down. And if you're in a really deep league, then again, Mechie is still, I'd rather take this next guy that we're going to talk about over Mechie. But I agree. I think you need to be in the bidding war for one of these players, because this offense is flying high through the air so well. And CJ Stroud is doing really good things with the football that you want to have a piece of this offense, especially as in the receiving game.
Yep.
But in terms of another receiver here, let's talk about the Green Bay Packers. And I said Jayden Reed is 63% owned, and he's a must own. I mean, Christian Watson pulled up lame with his hammy. You know him with soft tissue issues. He's always had them since he's been a rookie. It's rough to go through. And this could be this could be 3-4 week injury here. So that being said, you're going to need people, and the way they're playing football right now, I want a piece of this offense too. Jayden Reed, 63% owned. Romeo Doubs, who led in all receivers in yardage this past week, is 60% owned. He may not have the electric playability of Jayden Reed, which is why we like Reed over Doubs there. But Doubs is definitely a possession receiver and a go-to target for Jordan Love, especially in a pinch. But I'd throw it out there Dontavion Wicks, because we're talking about losing a big body receiver in Christian Watson. And what you get at a 6'1", 209-pound Wicks, they showed some flashes at the end of that game yesterday too as well. He was 3 for 4 for 43 yards. He has a 16.3 yards per reception average on the season so far. I think you have an opportunity to grab a guy, because he even had in week 12 a 3-catch for 91-yard game. I think he's got big playability, not quite the speed of Christian Watson, but the playability is there. And I think they're going to have to find that, especially with Musgrave out too as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would agree with you. The only concern I have is that Aaron Jones is most likely going to be back next week. And so what does this offense look now with A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones back there? Do they go to a 2 tight end set? Do they start running more of the only 2 wide set where Jayden Reed and Romeo Doubs have the option? I like Wicks here. We're going through priority. Like, I like Pierce, Noah Brown, and then Wicks, right?
Yeah.
If we're going down, I actually like one more guy over Wicks.
Let me finish on Wicks before you jump to that.
We'll talk about him next. But this offense is good enough, and they're throwing the ball well. They just had a great game against Kansas City. Jono didn't like it at all, but it was a fantastic game throwing, and the air raid attack was looking good. Christian Watson was a big part of that. And so how do they replace that going forward? I tend to think that it's going to be a lot of Doubs. And it's going to be a lot of Reed, and you're going to have some sprinkled in of other players. And Wicks looks to be that number 3 that's going to step up. I don't necessarily think that he's going to be an every week kind of play to replace Watson. And Watson is missing multiple weeks.
Yeah, it's mostly it's a boom play because of like I said, the yards per reception, the playability there. And you want a piece of this offense. Yeah, he may only get 5 targets on the game and catch 3, but he could go for 91 and a touchdown. He could go for 75 and a touchdown, but he could also go for 40 yards. Like there's a variability there, but if they're going to try and stretch the field with somebody, it could be Jayden Reed, it could be Romeo Doubs, or it could be the big body guy here down the sideline and take a one-on-one shot. I think they're going to use him. It doesn't bother me that Jones is coming back. It more bothers me for Dillon, just because to me, I think they're gonna ease Aaron Jones in. They're not gonna try and go crazy with him. And they've been more successful downfield passing than they were at the beginning of the season when they were dinking and dunking and they were missing on the deep balls. Where Jordan Love is hitting his deep ball passing pretty well. Like that dime he dropped right into the lap of Romeo Doubs was fantastic. So to me, I think that's what's going to help them out, and they're going to have to do that.
And Collinsworth didn't shut up about it.
I know,
or not Collinsworth. Who did the game? Not Herb Street.
I don't remember.
I don't remember. They just wouldn't stop talking about how Favre and Rodgers throw like that with their feet off the ground too, and that the jump throw. And we just heard about it for like the next quarter. It was so annoying.
Well, who's your last receiver here before we move on to our finishers here?
Elijah Moore. And this is all dependent on if Joe Flacco starts another week.
If Flacco goes.
Joe Flacco starts another week, Elijah Moore is a sneaky guy to help you get into the playoffs. If you're a team, let's say you're a Jalen Waddle owner, all right? Let's say you're a Jordan Addison owner.
I have both of them.
Let's say you're a Deontay Johnson owner, all right, and you're really, really struggling, or about to miss the playoffs, and you really need to win a game, and Joe Flacco is going to start for the Cleveland Browns. You should go and pick up Elijah Moore. Wink, wink, hint, hint. Jono.
He's already he's already owned in our leagues, so I'm not taking your advice. Can't do it.
This is a guy that his connection from his days with the Jets. Elijah Moore's only 100-yard game in his entire career was with Joe Flacco. They look like, especially with Amari Cooper going down, if Amari Cooper does not clear concussion protocol, they need a number one receiver there, and Elijah Moore looks to be that guy.
And Flacco hyper targets. Like Flacco finds a receiver and he hyper targets. Like that's what it hurt all Njoku owners, which is me. It hurt all the running backs out the backfield too as well, because he was trying to sling it downfield. I think part of that was just due to the lack of preparation for the position. Like if he comes back for another week and fully prepared, I think there's more plays that they're able to do and be better of an offense. They were one trick pony and it was downfield passing, but it was successful enough to get them in scoring positions. And Elijah, it was Amari Cooper till he got hurt. Yeah.
They were in that game before the fourth quarter. So, I mean, he's the other guy that I would say, but there's a caveat with that. If DTR plays, I don't want that. If PJ Walker plays, I don't want that either.
I don't see PJ Walker taking another snap for them. I think if they really want to see what they got with DTR, they're
going to see what they have with DTR. They drafted him for a reason. He's a really good player. He needs to develop, and this is a great time to let him develop, especially with Deshaun Watson done. So let me ask you this before we move on to
our
tight
QB
ends
streamers
or QB streamers. So if you're ranking Wicks, Moore, Jalen Hyatt, how would you rank them?
I would say a lot. If I knew Flacco was playing, Moore on top. If I knew Flacco was playing.
Okay.
Otherwise, I would go Wicks, Hyatt, Moore. But otherwise, I'd go Moore, Wicks, Hyatt. If
Let's say
Flacco's
Mark
playing.
Cooper doesn't play. You still have Moore at the bottom? DTR plays, but Amari Cooper's out.
Yeah, I'd still have because Njoku's the guy he's going to throw to 11, 12 times.
For 40 yards?
Yeah, but he's still going to do it.
But it's volume.
It's still going to do it. I don't like Elijah Moore in that offense without Amari Cooper, and I don't like it with DTR throwing him. But Flacco will find a way to get him the ball like he did when he was with the Jets, like he did with Garrett Wilson last year where Elijah Moore was gone and not on the offense at that point because he just hyper targets one guy and he's going to hyper target Elijah Moore. The only reason I'm down on Hyatt as a Giants fan, I love it. I just don't like his matchups. He's got some tough matchups ahead, especially Green Bay this coming week. I just don't like Hyatt against Green Bay this week. I think if they can get
Tyrod's
back.
Tyrod's back.
Yeah. If they got after Pat Mahomes like they did, this past week, that I just don't like it for him. So
start the Green Bay defense.
Yeah.
We'll move on to streamers.
Let's go talk about QB streamers here real quick. We mentioned Flacco, so the caveat is if he's playing, but he did throw 250 and 2 touchdowns. We both like him as another option coming out this week. A decent, solid play. Again, we only have 2 people that are missing. It's Sam Howell and Kyler Murray. So if those are your starters, yeah, I mean, you're going to get out what you – I mean, Sam Howell owners have been pretty good this season. So if somebody put their chips into Sam Howell after losing Aaron Rodgers or something like that, or Kirk Cousins, they traded for him, whatever it may be, you can get one of these guys here, and that's Flacco. We also really like Minshew against Cincinnati. He had a solid outing this past week. And Desmond Ridder has a favorable matchup against Tampa Bay, although the last time he played Tampa Bay, he only threw for 250, no touchdowns, but did run one in and had 38 on the ground. So that offense is moving a little bit better. Now, that being said, let's not forget there was a hamstring injury to Bijan Robinson.
He's fine.
He's going to be – you just don't know how that offense is going to move. I think it'll be just fine, even if he isn't fine and has missed some time, that Algier will be okay.
Yeah, he's going to be fine. Really, there's 3 guys that we listed. The guy you should go and get is Minshew. If you're a bottom, if you struggle at quarterback this entire season, if you're really, you're hurting at that position, go and pick him up. He's at least above what you got. He should be a starter in the league right now, or he should be a starter in your league right now. I've seen guys that are throwing in Russell Wilson, but they're also the people that are at the bottom of the league. That are doing that.
Listen, Russ was not far behind Minshew this past week. Yeah. If he didn't throw those 3 picks, which was unlike the rest of the season, he had a decent outing. But
at this point, you're not starting Derek Carr anymore, even if he does play. Like Geno's a guy that you could play. He's higher owned, but he has some tough matchups coming up. So I really like Minshew rest of season, honestly.
Hey, and if all else fails, throw Taysom Hill into your quarterback spot.
You can't go wrong there.
No. All right, we're going to give you a little bit of a playoff preview, little quick thing here. A nice little surprise, something to munch on. So if you waited this long, thanks for staying with us here. But let's give you a couple defenses that we like going into the playoffs, because that's one of the biggest make or breaks. Your team's playing so good all season, and it comes down here, and your defense that you've had locked and loaded, like the Cowboys or the Chiefs, like I had last night, other teams, they just don't have good matchups coming up for you through the playoffs times. And you're like, who am I going to get? Well, let's list them right here. Let's start off with the Colts. Week 15 through 17 is what we're going to tell you who these teams' opponents are. Colts have Pittsburgh, Atlanta, Las Vegas. Like the matchups. We have the Broncos. They have Detroit, New England, and the Chargers. Like those matchups. We have the Texans with Tennessee, Cleveland, Tennessee. Gotta like that. Packers, one of my favorites here. They have Tampa, Carolina, Minnesota. And then lastly, you have the LA Rams, who actually, they gave up some points to the Browns, but they have Washington, New Orleans, and the Giants. That's weeks 15 and 16 there are juicy for the Rams.
Well, what I was going to say with the Rams, and like you're gonna sit them next week because they're going to play Baltimore, but especially if you're a top team in the league and you've been kind of streaming defenses all year, this is a defense you should go and target. Because you can afford to lose probably next week. You're still going to end up getting to the playoffs if the rest of your team is set, going up against Washington, New Orleans, and then championship week going against the Giants. Sign me up. I like that. Yep,
I love it too. I think those are the streaming ones you want to get, and those are the low owned defenses. Like, we're not going to mention the big ones, but like people who just picked up Miami to go through some nice juicy lineup weeks here that they just had. I don't love their playoff matchups for people here. So you can couple what they have in their next games and link them with someone like the Colts, where they're going to play Pittsburgh, which most likely going to be Trubisky, Ritter, and then Aiden O'Connell, the rookie in Las Vegas. So
Miami is good. Like the next 2 weeks, they have Tennessee, and the Jets. Like those are great. But then the semifinals and finals are going against Dallas and Baltimore. How much do you like that?
Correct.
I don't.
Yeah. Go get the Packers against Carolina, then Minnesota, or the Rams, New Orleans, New York Giants. Like, it's exactly what we're saying. So take this nugget of information. Get them before your league mates decide to jump in and get on these guys.
Guys, do yourselves a favor, especially with defenses. Go and pick them up a couple weeks. Go start looking ahead at the next 2-3 weeks. Especially if you're a team that already made the playoffs, look at the matchups, because like these teams are gonna be like scraped up. Teams are gonna go and pick these defenses up, and you don't want to have to sit there and have to start the Arizona Cardinals when they're playing San Francisco twice.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead and do yourselves a favor. Start looking ahead into weeks 14, 15, and 16, especially if you're gearing for a championship. That's a championship mindset. You're not just looking at today. You're looking at the whole season, right? So it's not about the win this week. It's about winning the whole thing. So start thinking about it like that and plan your season accordingly. So even if you have
what I was going to say, we'll do a nice little playoff primer where we'll talk about some offenses and some people we like.
And John will have plenty of time because his offseason is going to start early. So he'll have plenty of time to do the playoff push.
But that being said, don't forget to hit that notification button like we talked about earlier. I have to get it. Chris just wants to rag on me because his team's doing great and my team's doing bad, and we were in the championship together last year, which he beat me in. I'm just going to get it all out there. Sticks and stones, buddy. But don't forget the notification button because we will give you our nice Thursday night preview. Chris will be feasting you guys up with that one. It's going to be a glorious matchup. And by I say that, it's going to be another boring Thursday night matchup of New England versus Pittsburgh. He'll bring you, as well as we'll both be back together again for the Saturday morning Cup of Joe show, where we give you the weekend slate of all the matchups. And if you can't see, that is our trophy, our league trophy.
It's sitting here 2 years in a row.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So don't forget to hit that notification button. You get all the drops that we have come to you. Thanks for sticking with us through this longer waiver wire episode. Don't forget to leave a comment if you need anything. And as always, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
See you guys.